Well, I think I have a problem at the moment with a freezing picture. So just a minute and I'll be back. I'll relaunch the show. Hang on a minute out there. Right, am I here? I think I might be. All right, apologies for that. Slight break in service there. I'm not quite sure what's happened, but it seems to be going out at the moment after a reboot. No, it's frozen again. It's frozen again. Right, I'm struggling this morning. Wi-Fi signal appears to be all right. Anybody receiving me? If you can just put something up in the comments. Clive said hit it with an axe. Paul says looks good and looks fine. Okay, so hopefully it is just my end, my problem. Right, okay. Anyway, I've got quite a lot to get through this morning, so I better crack on a bit. It's show number 181. It's Wednesday, the 20th of October. You're watching Elevenses with Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills Rider Training. And in today's newscast, We have the UK is planning legislation to turn off EV chargers at peak hours. That's a story that appeared just last night. Reports of EU compulsory intelligent speed assistance by 2030 on motorcycles is somewhat exaggerated. New Zealand, they will be getting compulsory ABS on all bikes, so coming soon. France could be aiming new noise cameras at bikes. So there's quite a lot of legislation there affecting motorcycles appearing. A Gwent road safety campaign news report appeared to suggest that being insufficiently visible is a factor in motorcycle crashes that don't involve another vehicle, which is an interesting one. And we'll have a quick look at the Moto Morini Seiemmezzo as well before heading on to today's better biking tip, which was staying warm by heating the core and not the fingers. I held that one over from Sunday because there was so much on Sunday to talk about, if you remember. Right, so yeah, Clive says he's got us. Nigel says receiving okay. Paul has also looked in, and Steve has said, are you now using Windows 11s? No, I haven't actually upgraded it yet, although the laptop is 11s capable. I've left it be for the time being. Well, I'll let the usual thing, I'll let other people sort the problems out and then upgrade probably just before they withdraw support. That's what happened with Windows 7, actually. Anyway, that's another matter altogether. So settle yourselves down and we'll crack on with the news. Now, the first signs that cheap and unrestricted access to the UK's electricity grid for electric car and bike owners is about to come to an end came with the news that broke yesterday evening that the government plans to pass legislation that will see EV home and workplace chargers being switched off at peak times to avoid overloading the national electricity grid and causing blackouts. Now, that news came in an announcement from Transport Secretary Grant Shapps yesterday. Now, there are 14 million electric cars to be projected to be on the road by 2030. Currently we have around 40 million, so that gives you an idea of how many will have gone electric. And it's inevitable that when our owners arrive home from work and want to plug in their cars to recharge, the grid will be placed under some strain. So under the proposed new law, which if ratified would come into force from Monday the 30th of May next year, all new home and workplace chargers being installed would have to be smart chargers and they would have to be connected to the internet. And what's being proposed is these would have presets that limit their function between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. and then from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. And they could also be deactivated remotely at other times to prevent grid spikes and blackouts. Now, the government claims, of course, that this would actually save drivers money because it would mean that they would charge up overnight during off-peak hours when electricity is cheaper. And the report does suggest that users would be able to override the presets if needed, although how that would work isn't clear. Now, in the future, hopes are being placed in what's known as vehicle-to-grid V2G technology. Now, this would allow the grid to literally to claw back power from already charged EV batteries to supplement the electricity supply during peak hours. And the idea is that those batteries would then be recharged again when the overall demand is actually extremely low. However, what isn't clear to me is how that regular cycling of the battery would affect the lifetime of the EV batteries. Now, obviously, if the battery was cycled through on a daily basis, being drained and then recharged, that would actually dramatically decrease the expected life of the battery if you were simply charging it as needed. The life is predicted to be several thousand cycles, but even so, if it's being done on a daily basis rather than, say, once a week, that would be a fairly dramatic reduction in lifetime. Public and rapid chargers on motorways and A roads would be exempt from this plan. But with Tesla, Volkswagen and Nissan all having developed their own private charging infrastructure, one of the big problems is industry-wide compatibility. It's still an issue. Now, what's not mentioned is the likelihood that smart chargers would allow for differential charging for EVs. Now, many people are being encouraged to switch to electric vehicles with statements such as this one I found in an article just a day or two ago. Fuel savings for using an EV are staggering compared to the traditional combustion engine. And another article goes on to explain that home charging the car for up to 200 miles costs just £2.50 compared with around £30 to refill with fuel. And it goes on to suggest that current fuel price hikes as a result of the fuel crisis, the idea of the average electric vehicle driver paying just £310 per year on electricity to recharge a car driving 10,000 miles at the UK's average electricity price is highly appealing. So there's just one problem with that vision. Now, right now, just under 60% of the pump price of unleaded fuel is actually tax, and that tax obviously goes to the government's own revenue stream. Now, in the last financial year, how much tax came from fuel? Well, it was around £20 billion. That's actually down from 28 billion the previous year, thanks to the lockdown issues, presumably. But it still amounts to around 3% of all government income. That's a huge, huge chunk. Now, it's simply inconceivable that the Exchequer wouldn't seek to fill that hole. So smart chargers would allow the electricity to be used for EVs to be differentially charged, or i.e. taxed. It's the obvious answer to the problem. Okay, so just a quick reminder, you are watching Elevenses with Kevin Williams here. If you've got questions or comments on anything I talk about, do drop me a line. I will try to get back to you during the show. If I can't, I will respond at the end of the show when I go off air. So what's next? Well, something that I saw posted up on one of the bike forums was a story that motorcycles will be configured with compulsory intelligent speed assistance by 2030. The article wrote it in terms that implied that it was already a done deal, and it would happen. And unfortunately, that's the sort of typical of a report that's gets put up on bike forums and then gets repeated. It linked to an item on the BMF's British Motorcyclist website. But what actually happened is this. Now, on Tuesday, the 5th of October 2021, the European Parliament did actually vote positively on a document which suggested that a package of measures should be applied to road safety. This included a 30km/h speed limit in cities, zero tolerance for drink driving, an accelerated modal shift to other forms of transport, and a new European agency for road transport. The author of the report said, "We already know what kills on the road, therefore we're calling on the Commission and governments to apply specific life-saving measures to support these efforts." So yes, intelligent speed assistance does in fact appear in the draft report, but it's a long way from saying it's going to happen, because this particular piece of work is a non-legislative report. Now, basically that means it was drawn up to raise awareness of issues, and it would be voted upon and put forward then to attempt to convince the European Commission to create legislative proposals to address those issues. So in itself, it creates no kind of legal requirement, and a lot more has to be done yet to actually bring that into law. Now, nevertheless, of course, entirely unsurprisingly, the measure has attracted the ire of the Federation of European Motorcyclists Associations, FEMA. Their General Secretary, Dolf Willigers said in a statement, "We do not support any technical feature that takes away the control of the motorcycle from the rider. And therefore, although we understand the need to reduce speed in certain situations, we see any kind of intelligent speed assistance that interferes with engine control as a danger for motorcyclists, as we've already discussed with the European Commission in 2019. The Commission agreed with us that you cannot just fit ISA to motorcycles." Personally, given the totally chaotic nature of speed limits currently in the UK, where you can be going from a 30 to a 20 and back to a 30 on a road that simply doesn't change any kind of nature, maybe we shouldn't be too quick to condemn the idea that at least the motorcycle could be fitted with a system that detects speed limits and alerts the rider that there has been a change of limit. I wouldn't be too unhappy to have that fitted, I have to say, to my bike or car. I'm not too convinced that I would like the bike itself to slow me down. Okay, so don't forget, Elevenses goes out on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11 a.m. UK time. Clocks will be going back fairly soon, won't they? So that's something to think about. You can catch up here on Facebook. It remains on the system. But if you want to find it a little bit more easily, you can always head over to my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget the all-important UK on the end, or you will get somebody showing you how to start a fire with 2 sticks or something similar. Right, okay, so we have a comment from Nigel, who says, "Who would ever have thought these problems with the electricity supply for EVs would crop up?" Well, just about everybody except the industry and government. And I suspect some of the early adopters who just thought they were going to get a bargain forever. Yeah, absolutely, Nigel. I can't disagree with any of that. All right, so on with the next item. So if that involves intelligent speed assistance and something which is being mooted but is unlikely to become a legal requirement for motorcycles just yet, over in New Zealand, all current model new motorcycles and newly imported used motorcycles over 125 will be required to have ABS from November the 1st. Now note that newly imported used motorcycles. What that'll put an end to is bringing in cheap non-ABS bikes to NZ. Now, it's one of the steps towards New Zealand's Road to Zero strategy, where no one is killed or seriously injured on our roads, as a spokesman for Waka Kotahi Transport Agency said. International studies show ABS can reduce crashes by more than a third, as crashes involving motorcyclists often result in death or serious injury. This will have an immediate and significant safety benefit. And their spokesman went on to say that in 2019 alone, 56 people motorcycling were killed, and they say that's 10 more than 2017, 470 seriously injured, and 972 suffering minor injuries. Previously, they point out that current registered motorcycles are not required to be retrofitted. Some trial and enduro models used for the purposes of sanctioned competition will be exempt, and there will be some exceptions for classic or collectible motorcycles. So presumably that will still allow you to bring in your 1920 Harley Davidson or something along those lines. Right, what else is in the news? Well, yet more legislation that could potentially affect motorcycles, and that is over on the other side of the channel in France. The government over there are ready to test sound radars. Now, you may have followed stories that have suggested that some of the trial sites for these noise guns that have gone up in London have been less than successful in detecting vehicles, getting confused by other noise around them. But over in France, it's being proposed as one of a set of measures that could be employed to conform with EU objectives to improve road safety, protect the environment, and reduce noise levels. Now, it's a response to the suspension of the planned control technique, the regular vehicle inspection, which would have been along the lines of the UK's MOT, which was due to be introduced for all 2- and 3-wheeled vehicles in 2023. Currently, if you have a motorcycle in France, you do not have to have it roadworthiness tested. Now, that particular measure was put on hold in August until further notice after the direct intervention of the French President Emmanuel Macron. However, if France, which has more motorcycles than any other European country, apparently, does not introduce alternative measures to fall in line with the EU directive by 2024, the country would face daily fines. Now, committees have been set up to suggest ways to meet the target. One group has been tasked with looking at education programs for all road users about the dangers faced by motorcyclists, as well as how motorcyclists could invest in new safety equipment, and they're talking here about airbag jackets and trousers, and also how the local département in France could actually improve the roads to further protect motorcyclists. Last time up we talked about barriers, you may remember. To improve the environment, another committee will see if government incentives to scrap old polluting cars could be extended to motorcycles. And on the noise pollution issue, another government group will examine whether these sound radars which flash motorcycles which make too much noise could be introduced. Now, no date for submission of the reports has been given, and that has led to some suggestions that these consultative committees are simply a way of kicking the can down the road until after government elections next year. Okay, so all right. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, if you find these pieces of information, bits of news useful, you can always go over to my Ko-fi page. The URL is there, ko-fi.com/survival skills, and you can sign up as a supporter or even a subscriber there and get access to hundreds of better biking articles. So go take a look. There's plenty to read over there that's free. But if you do become a supporter or subscriber, you open up a lot more content from my Facebook archive and new items too. Right, what's Nigel got to say? Nigel's also said he likes the idea of some speed limit recognition systems, GPS and sign recognition. There's a lot of sign is, as you say, at best confusing. Yes, absolutely. Which is the one that gets me every time. Holloway Road, which goes from 30 to 20 without any kind of real warning. Right, okay, so talking about road safety generally, a campaign has been launched urging drivers in Gwent to look once, look twice, think bike. You may have heard that once or twice before. It dates back right to the 1970s in the original Think Bike video. Now, my first thought when I heard this was it's not particularly good timing, really, is it? It's late October, and even if Sergeant Leighton Heelan did report that there were 25 serious road traffic collisions involving motorcyclists in Gwent in the last 12 months up to September the 8th, resulting in 3 fatalities and 25 serious injuries, you only really need to look out the window or watch the weather forecast to realise that we're pretty obviously out of the peak riding season now, so you're not going to see nearly so many bikes on the road as you would have done obviously from sort of May, June onwards. The campaign uses the usual lines about motorcyclists having the highest rates of death or serious injury of all road users, and the line comes out that most cyclists are around 45 more times likely to be killed or seriously injured on the road than car drivers. That seems a bit higher than usual to me, but you know, it's easy to select a particular chunk of data to make a claim like that. Having said that, the aims aren't unreasonable. They're asking car drivers to commit to a simple change by looking twice for bikes, and asking motorcyclists to commit to riding responsibly and to ride defensively. and also encouraging riders to read the road and reduce the risk. All right, that was so far so good, if not particularly inspired and badly timed. But the thing that caught my eye was the South Wales Argus, where I found this story, decided they tried to add some extra flavour to the bare press release by quoting some information from the road safety charity Break. So the first thing that I noticed was that the report suggested almost 4/5 of motorcycle collisions involve another vehicle. Well, they do. That's true. But the next line is the old favourite. These collisions are caused, quote, mainly by car drivers failing to look properly for bikes, unquote. Well, if you've seen or read any of my work on the science of being seen, you'll know this simply isn't how it works. Drivers do look, and nearly every time they do see bikes, because crashes are genuinely very, very rare. But obviously, things occasionally do go wrong. Out of 40 million cars, 3 million bikes, and uncounted numbers of junctions nationwide, there are still 100 bike fatalities, roughly speaking, at junctions every year, and roughly 1,000 serious injuries. So in real terms, the numbers are tiny. So telling riders that drivers don't look properly for bikes helps no one to reduce the numbers of these collisions. And it gets worse. We're then told, in serious collisions where a four-wheeled vehicle is not involved, the cause is usually rider error. Well, okay, yes, if you are falling off your motorcycle, yes, it is usually rider error if nobody else is involved. But the causes, we're told, are poor road positioning. Well, okay, yes, I could see that. You can go into a corner offline, that would be a problem. You could make a poor judgment of speed into bends. Yes, so again, that would be an issue. But I'm not entirely convinced I understand how being insufficiently visible on the road could possibly cause a single vehicle crash. If no other vehicles involved, how on earth does visibility come into it? And while I'm being picky, there's no such thing as insufficiently visible either. Something is either capable of being seen, it's visible, or it isn't. It's incapable of being seen. It's not partially visible. You can be conspicuous, you can be inconspicuous, but visibility is either an or. So no wonder riders have such confused ideas about crashing, and no wonder drivers get the wrong end of the stick when it comes to why riders fall off. Right, okay, Paul has something to say here on the previous story. He says the French market surveillance and enforcement authorities are extremely active in checking the status of motorcyclists' apparel. Unfortunately, they appear to be focusing only on checking the paperwork of companies which have tested and certified their products as required by EU law since 2018. While those companies who have not met their legal requirements are not troubled by visits. Okay, so yes, all right. The rest of that comment has gone missing on here, Paul, so I can't read it. So I'll come back to that later. Right, so that's Paul talking about clothing. Right, so, all right, where are we? Well, we're on to a bit of news about a motorbike after the legislation-based stuff this morning. It's got a bit of a relief, actually, to come on to something a bit more light-hearted. Moto Morini is another historic European brand, company founded by Alfonso Morini all the way back in 1937. And they managed to remain independent till 1987, when, like so much of the Italian motorcycle industry, they were actually bought out by Cagiva. Now, Cagiva themselves were a small manufacturer of metal components, and they branched out into motorcycles in 1978 when they bought the old Seiemmezzo factory from Harley Davidson. Now, by 1985, Cagiva had bought up virtually all the Italian models brands. They'd got Ducati, Morini, Husqvarna, which was Swedish, and MV Agusta. Were all under their control. Now, after that, the history of Cagiva gets even more complicated with restructuring, rebranding, and sell-offs. But to keep things shortish, Morini Franco Motori reclaimed the Moto Morini brand in 1999, but went bankrupt in 2010. Now, a new Italian company called Eagle Bike got back into producing large capacity bikes under the Moto Morini name, but they sold out in 2018 after they went bust to a Chinese conglomerate called Zongneng Vehicle Group. So where are we now? Well, basically, Moto Morini still has a presence in the European market, and it's just launched 2 versions of its Seiemmezzo platform. Now, originally unveiled at the 2019 EICMA show, that's the one in Milan, the Seiemmezzo STR, which is a naked bike, and the SCR, which is a scrambler, have joined the previously revealed X-Cape. I've forgotten to get my pictures up. Where's it gone? That's because I lost the plot on the let me get this sorted out. 1 second. There we go. We should now have a picture of a motorcycle on screen. That's the X-Cape. That was revealed earlier. As you can see, it's an adventure bike. The name Seiemmezzo actually means 6.5, and that harks back to the iconic 3.5 V twins, the 3.5s of the 70s and 80s. My brother's actually had one in a box now for several years. He keeps promising to rebuild it, but I haven't seen any progress on it, as with so many cases like that. Now, both of these variants and the X-Cape are based around a liquid-cooled 649 parallel twin, not a V-twin, sadly, mated to a 6-speed transmission, built into a steel trellis frame. You get aluminium swing arm, upside-down forks, and a rear monoshock. The usual electronics package, you get a 5-inch LCD display and all-round LED lights as well. The Scrambler and the X-Cape get a 19-inch front and a 17-inch rear, while the Naked, which I have a picture of just here, gets a rather unusual 18-inch front wheel. All the bikes feature tubeless spoked rims, and frankly, that's something I think all manufacturers should have switched to by now. The days of tubes should have gone the way of ancient history, along with Lucas headlights, I think. The 3 discs on the bikes all have Bosch switchable ABS. The bikes are fairly hefty, 230 kilos fueled up. The Nakeds might be a little bit lighter. Now, the double overhead cam 8-valve 650 parallel twin does bear some similarity to the Kawasaki ER6 item. I think it might be the same engine used in the CF Moto bikes, although don't quote me on that. What is quoted is a power output of 60 PS at 8,250 RPM, which is pretty punchy, and a max torque of 56 Newton meters. So that should give the bikes a decent top speed, probably in excess of 110 miles per hour. The Seiemmezzo Scrambler and Nakeds haven't yet appeared on the listings sites, but the X-Cape has appeared, and hopefully we'll see those 2 Nakeds on the road fairly soon. And honestly, I don't think they're the worst looking bikes I've seen this year. Right, so it's on to the better biking tip, which is all about heated clothing. Now, it's time for the usual crop of heated gloves and grips adverts. One advert promises a pair of grips with 5 heat settings and an intelligent heat controller, and they're currently reduced from £80 to £45. So it's the sort of thing that many riders will be splashing out on as temperatures fall in the next few weeks. So are they worth the cash? Well, certainly motorcycles and cold weather aren't entirely compatible. The chill factor is considerable on a bike, and our hands are stuck out in the wind. And also, of course, with our fingers, they have a large surface area from which to lose heat. So they tend to be the first part of our body that we notice getting cold on the motorcycle, with perhaps the exception of our nose. Unfortunately, because gloves still need to be thin and flexible to operate the controls, are probably the most difficult part of the body to keep warm. And I have to say, I tried many, many different ways over the years, and I did make a list some years ago, which I revisited for this article. I've tried thick gloves, thermal gloves, World War II flying gauntlets. Yes, I really did get a pair of those, complete with sheepskin lining. Skiing gloves. I tried silk liners. I tried thermal inners, over mitts, handlebar muffs. I even used cut down milk containers stuck over the handlebars as a courier because A, they were waterproof, and B, they were cheap. I used heated inners, I used heated handlebar grips, and I used heated gloves. But before we go on to deciding what works and what doesn't work, let's just consider why hypothermia isn't uncommon when riding a bike. Martin asks, are handlebar muffs a thing in the UK? They certainly are, Martin. You will find lots and lots of the delivery riders using them, and also plenty of commuters. So how do we lose heat from the body? Well, the answer is three ways: radiation, convection, and conduction. Now, what happens to the, how do we keep the body warm? Well, the answer is by circulating warm blood. As you probably know, the heart pumps it out down the arms and legs to hands and feet, and then it flows back to the heart again. So when the weather's cold, what happens is the air pumped out to the extremities, arms and legs. They act as large radiators, effectively, and the blood in our extremities is cooled before being returned to the core of the body. So it has to be reheated before it does the trip again. Now, our bodies are coped to deal with mild cooling. We literally just turn up the thermostat a bit and burn more fuel to actually increase the heat output. So we don't really feel any of that, but there is a limit. And once we start losing heat faster than the body can replace it, then we start to chill. And the steeper the temperature gradient, essentially how cold it is outside versus our body temperature, the faster we chill. Now, what happens next? Well, this has been the research of sort of physiology. We've known much of this for many years. As our core temperature starts to fall, the circulation of warm blood out to the surface capillary starts to shut down. So the first thing we feel is that the skin actually starts to feel cold to the touch. Our fingers then start to chill, and eventually hands and feet, even arms and legs, start to go cold as more and more of the blood network is actually shut down to preserve the heat in the body's core. Now, what happens when that blood gets cut off? Well, basically, the muscles operating fingers, hands, and feet become stiff and unresponsive. I can remember one of my earliest motorcycle journeys in cold weather. I'd been playing football for the university down in southwest London. And I was riding back to Kent that night. Now, I think we finished the game at about 4:30, 4:45. So I remember being on the bike by about 5:30, by which time it was dark. It was already icy. I was scraping ice off the seat. And I had something like a 2-hour ride to get home. And by the time I did get home, I was so cold. I was shivering uncontrollably, and I couldn't actually manage to change gear. I just changed down to second going into Maidstone, but I couldn't actually get back up the gearbox. My feet and hands were so cold. So I rode the last 5 or 6 miles home in second gear. Now that is actually hypothermia. That is actually set in at that point. So what happens next? Well, we also start losing mental focus too. The brain gets affected. We start making poor decisions. So why did I get so cold? Well, it's pretty obvious if you read what I've just, remember what I've just said. The body's efforts were attempting to keep the core temperature up as high as possible by shutting down the blood supply to the extremities. So what if we stick on a pair of heated grips or use heated gloves? Well, essentially what we are doing is we are treating the symptoms and not the disease. We're treating the cold hands and not the chilling core. So what can we do about it? Well, Again, the answer comes from sports physiology. Think about the insulation on a house. We think of it as retaining heat, but what it really does is it slows down the rate of heat loss. Once the temperature gradient is high enough, the house will cool down and we have to turn the heating up. So we can only generate enough warmth or retain enough warmth to a certain point with thermal clothing. We can layer up, and if we're only going short distances, we probably won't notice the heat loss. It hasn't got that far, just like a short cold night as opposed to a long winter night. Difference between a short ride and a long ride. So the minute we do a long ride in that same clothing, we'll continue to lose heat. The stuff I'd been using on my short journeys to college for sort of 30 minutes turned out to be completely inappropriate for a 2-hour ride in cold weather. So if you are habitually a short distance ride and suddenly do a long trip, that's why it will be that the clothing that's kept you nice and toasty on those short runs suddenly lets you get cold. Okay, how much can we add thermal insulation? Well, after a bit, it just gets too complicated. We end up looking like the Michelin Man. A lot of thermal gear. Just try looking over your shoulder, for example. Doesn't become easy. So remember the solution for the house. You actually turn the heating up. So how do we supplement the body's own supply? Well, the answer is that we use something that heats the body's core, and that means heated clothing is the answer. A heated jacket or a heated waistcoat, because what it does is it puts the heat in where it's needed, around the body itself, and not down the fingers where it'll just simply evaporate back out into the atmosphere again. So with core temperature maintained with heated clothing, so is the circulation. Core temperature stays high, blood flows down the arms to the fingers, and our hands stay reasonably warm. So my experience as a blood runner, when I actually managed to get hold of one of the very first heated waistcoats to arrive in the UK, was that I could ride in serious sub-zero temperatures and not get icy freezing cold. I did one 3 a.m. ride in January, I remember, where it was -10 Celsius outside, and my fingers still got cold in my normal winter gloves, but they didn't go numb. Now, I really would have struggled that 3-hour ride to do that without that heated waistcoat. So basically what I found is if it's just chilly out, sort of 10 down to about 5 degrees C, a long sleeve shirt, light fleece, then my heated waistcoat keeps me warm. If it's colder than that, down to about 0, what I tend to do is put the waistcoat under the fleece. Below 0, I used to put unlined waterproofs over the riding suit, and that is what kept me going on those overnight or blood runs. How much do you pay? Well, around £100 will get you a fairly basic waistcoat. You can pay a lot more. But one thing I will tell you is that they last a lot longer than the heated grips. My heated grips used to pack up usually after a year. I'd normally fit a new set every autumn. The gloves didn't last a lot longer. Sometimes I was replacing those twice a year, so they got expensive. Don't worry about current draw. The heated waistcoats draw about 30 watts, about half a halogen headlight, or just a bit more than the brake light. You can daisy chain with many of them. You can actually add heated gloves, socks, leggings, collars for some manufacturers, but do make sure if you start adding stuff that your alternator will cope. You should cope with without any problem with a waistcoat, but start adding stuff and you could overload everything. What I would advise though is you avoid a heated all-in-one jacket, because you're just adding bulk to the jacket basically, and it means you're wearing it when you don't need it, so you will wear it out. Get a separate waistcoat. You can just basically put that on when you need it. Final tip, plug the leaks where there is air leaking in. Scarves, neck warmers, that kind of thing will help. If you can zip a jacket to trousers, that'll help enormously. One-piece suit is even better. When you're layering, several thin layers are always better than one thick one, because the idea is to trap air and stop it moving. I was going to say, yes, bib and brace trousers as well under a jacket always help wear keep the kidneys warm, I tend to use cycling bib and brace under my riding kit when it's really, really cold. But one final word of warning, although you can get temperature controllers, you can also just use a simple on-off switch on the dash and just turn it on and off when you get cold. But don't forget to use a fuse, or you could end up setting your bike alight. And the final thing, don't put the heated waistcoat next to the skin. Somebody did that, went out for a ride and managed to burn themselves fairly spectacularly. The bike forum. So if you're going to spend money on the bike to stay warm, my thinking would be get yourself that heated waistcoat first of all, and then if your hands are still cold, then think about the grips and the heated gloves. But start with the waistcoat. You may find that it's all you need. So last thing of all, don't forget the next presentation is on breaking the circle, I'm calling it, and it is a talk about braking in bends, whether it's an avoid at all costs maneuver or an essential skill. We will look at the pros and the cons and how to do it. So if you are interested in coming along to that, do come over and have a look at the page here where you can book a ticket. That is going out in October. No, it's not. It's going out in November, isn't it? We're already in October. Wednesday, the 3rd of November at 8 p.m. for that webcast. Right, so that's it. We've gone on a little bit longer than normal today with all that news coming out over the last couple of days. It's been a busy week for motorcycle legislation. So thanks for looking in. Great to see you all. Don't forget, if you have anything you want to share with me, do drop me a line and I will get back to you at the end of the show. But meanwhile, from me, Kevin Williams, it's that Elevenses. That's it. Ride safe out there and enjoy your day.